What's the purpose of a language? Why do we use language? Why do we speak? This world is full of all kinds of words, expressions, slogans, ideas, thoughts, all kinds of organized thoughts, views, opinions. They're all words. But what is the purpose of speaking? What is the purpose of saying something? For most of us, words are our life, aren't they? We have relied on words so much in every corner of the living. But we don't ask, what is the purpose of speaking? Why do we have a language? Isn't it? We speak to communicate. So we use words to point to something. So we speak out. And the other side also need to look. Oh, is that thing? Then the function of the verse finishes. But do we use words in that way or not? Or we merely rely on words at all? We don't look. We simply rely on the images triggered by the verse. So we exchange ideas. We exchange views. We argue. We discuss. But we don't communicate. Do we? Because the very rely on words has already denied communication. Is that so? And collectively, we become so dependent on words. And this world becomes so verbal. This reality is so verbal and also unique. Everybody has their unique reality. But it is some verbal things, isn't it? Is that the root of all the superficialities? Because the mind has been so lazy and therefore conditioned to so many thoughts which are worse. And the mind doesn't look to validate or invalidate. That's why we are losing this capacity to communicate, aren't we? Now, each of us is so relying on words, so we become more and more verbal and superficial. We rely on the verse, on the thoughts, on the images carried by the verse to give us a kind of feeling, either satisfaction or fulfillment or certainty or security. And each of us is relying on verse in a very different way. So we become more and more separated. Is that so? And each of us is more and more into their own illusions, which is their unique verse, their unique expressions. Are we doing that all the time in our life? So we collectively debase the language, reduce it to something very dangerous. Isn't it? And all kinds of philosophies, theories, views are being churned out by words. But we don't really look and observe to validate whether it is true or not. We depend on words. So our life is further and further away from the earth, isn't it? And we have issues, endless issues. A verbal mind is deeply isolated, isn't it? Because such a mind has its own unique expressions. Nobody understands. And we are so lonely. And also crave being understood. But the very verbal state denies everything. And this mind, therefore, is conditioned on so many things because of this verbal state, isn't it? And we rely on verse, and the verse become the order, the command. So we just react to the verse, act based on verse. And the society is written with so many rules, laws. You obey. Why? You don't look, you just obey. You just conform. What's the point? Our life is becoming more and more mechanical, isn't it? Because this relying on verse without looking or observing is mechanical. And therefore, we have all kinds of robots or artificial intelligence to replace us. Because any mechanical things can be imitated by a computer, by a machine. And look at the website, the internet. They use all kinds of artificial intelligence algorithm. Why is there space for this algorithm? Isn't it because of a utterly mechanical life can be imitated by computer? And all the businesses use that to personalize the service, to profit more and more and more. But why are we so mechanical? We merely conform, obey, do our so-called obligation. And we are educated by the society in this way, by the culture, by this environment. And we never question it, doubt it. And collectively, we are making this society more and more mechanical, therefore efficient, but also brutal, isn't it? Being mechanical is brutality, isn't it? And we are conditioned to that, aren't we? And this society becomes more and more brutal. Obviously, everybody can feel it. It's so obvious. And then we are making this society in this way, collectively. At the same time, we suffer tremendously. This separation, this division is always there, with numerous conflict. Where there's division, there's conflict. It's a fact. Do you see that? And we become more and more isolated. When this whole body, which is also mind, when it is in isolation, it feels insecure. It is also a fact. So this society has guaranteed everyone's physical survival. More than enough food, more than enough clothes. But there's such a huge demand for psychological security. And then there's a collective illusion for a permanent group. Which is something can't be achieved forever. Because we don't deal with the fundamental issues, the isolation. This mechanical way of living, which is full of conformity, leads to this isolated state. And everyone is struggling. But we don't communicate. Because we don't know how to communicate. We all rely on words for more illusions, for more theories, for more ideas, but we don't communicate. Where there's communication, there's no isolation. So simple. But we don't do that at all. So each of us is accumulating and also has accumulated too many thoughts, ideas, and also the so-called experiences. We should believe in our personal experiences, don't we? What is experience? Suppose you go to a beautiful place, like a place in a mountain. There's a huge lake and the beautiful sunshine, the green trees, grass, and animals. And you spend a whole week there, so relaxed, because there's no disturbance from other people. You can enjoy that quietude. Then, after you come back from that place, you have the remembrance of that experience. And you want to express it, verbalize it, to enhance that memory. And you want to repeat it, because that replay of the experience will give you a sense of satisfaction. And you want to reproduce it. Do you notice that process? When we in that place, the mind and body is experiencing it. But after that, the mind is generating thoughts to depict, to describe that experience. But then, this experience becomes something verbal. And I hold on to that experience, which become part of me, become my past. Is that what we are doing all the time in our life? Verbalizing what we experience it and make it as some the so-called experience and put it in a memory and then replay it all the time. That's what we call experience, isn't it? Is experience new or not? When you verbalize it, you recognize it. And that experience is never new, isn't it? Because you recognize it. You know it. When you really experience it in that place, you don't know it. But when you verbalize it, it is already the thought processes. In that thought processes, you recognize it. You fix it in the memory. I will say, oh yeah, this is me, or the past. I'm so happy about that. And all the rest of it. So that verbalized experience brings about pleasure. The mind holds onto it, want to perpetuate the pleasure. So for most of us, experience is something verbal. And we hold on to that. I think that's part of me. And the very holding on to that re-enhance the me. Isn't it? the experience itself is much content of this entity, which is called the me, the self, the ego. And they are all thought processes. Thoughts are carried by verse, and we rely on verse to trigger the thoughts, to satisfy us. So it is the same pattern. Our life is so verbal. We don't communicate. We don't look. And this verbal experience only enhances our isolation. And this me become deep-seated, deep-rooted. Can you experience without verbalizing the experience? When we are verbalizing the experience, we are recognizing it. The very process of recognition is translating, right? If we don't verbalize it, truly experience now, you don't know it. It is always fresh, always new. But when you verbalize it, everything is translated into something old, and you enhance it, right? Which become part of you. So the me is always self-enhanced in the old pattern, in the old way. So that's why we are always missing this moment, because the mind is always verbalizing and recognizing. But when we are really now living at this moment fully, the mind can't verbalize or recognize. So this habitual way of verbalizing and recognizing places us in the past, doesn't it? And therefore, we can't communicate. Because communication requires observing, looking in full attention. And the full attention is only at this moment. When you really look, not to verbalize it, not to recognize it, then that's full attention. That's very simple, isn't it? Just like you look at the camera. Just look. Don't verbalize it. Don't think about, don't say, oh, it's some brand. Don't recognize it. Just look. Just observe. So this whole process of verbalizing something and recognizing something is conditioned, and it's always conditional, because the mind is relying on words, else it can't verbalize. You see, the same pattern is repeated all the time in our life. Can we stop verbalizing? Just look. The me, the self, the ego is also some words, isn't it? My house, my name, my title, my position, my family, my wife, my husband, my money. You see, they are all verbal. And the mind is holding on to that. This sense of me is always re-enhanced. So, madam, just see how simple it is when you stop verbalizing totally. There's no you at all. Finished. Don't verbalize it. Just look, feel, perceive. There's no observer because the observer is the past, the verbal existence around the center, which is me, is still the result of the verbalization. So can you live a life without verbalizing? It doesn't mean that you don't speak. We don't deny language. This chattering state of mind is a result of this habitual way of verbalizing, isn't it? When we really communicate, we use verbs carefully. That's no issues. But most of us keep verbalizing all the time. Can we end that totally? To end that, it needs no time. You can do it immediately. Can't you? Right? Just do it. But that's become one of the most difficult things ever for most of us. Why? Isn't it because the words, the expressions, has given us tremendous pleasure, certainty, security. My belief is based on that. My faith is based on that. Then I can't let go of them. Because I don't know what would happen if I let go of all those words. You see, the mind is craving certainty. It is still verbalizing. It is a loop. So I can't let go of them. I'm full of fear. And then I still stay in the old place where I was. So this verbal state of mind is always craving certainty, the known, comfort. And it is afraid of the unknown. And such a mind doesn't give itself a chance to experience what it's like when you really let go of the verse. Because the verbal mind still holds onto its own experience. It thinks that what it imagines is the true, because it doesn't realize that no matter what it imagines, it is always limited. Thoughts are always limited. Thoughts can't replace the actuality. But again, back to the same loop. We rely on verse. That's why we don't see the limitation of thoughts. And we take the thoughts as the actualities. So that's why when the mind is imagining what would happen when one let go of everything, these verbal things, when it's still relying on thoughts to imagine and taking the thoughts as the actualities. That's why such a mind makes no action at all. So can the mind see the limitation with thoughts? What is actually taking place can't be described by thoughts at all. When the mind is really seeing that clearly, there's only sheerly action, notabilize, finished. Else the mind is always going to different groups, looking for different gurus, join different practice groups or organizations. But the real solution is seeing always clearly and sheerly act. Finished. But we don't finish it, right? One of the difficult things ever is to finish it. Look at this society, this world we are living in. There are so many things, always continuing, never end. Ending it is a matter of sheer action, isn't it? Just end it, finished. You see, such a verbal state of mind is always continuing, always looking for new attachment, new certainties, new hopes, new promises. And that's our problem. Can we end that state of mind? Just look and observe now. When you are really looking and observing, you are finishing. You are ending all the time. And only a life that can end itself can come upon what is love. To end is to die to this moment. Where there's ending, there is a new beginning all the time. And now, everything starts again. And that's the foundation of a fresh life. But we don't do that, most of us. We are afraid of death, aren't we? Look at our fear. Tremendous fear about death. We want more comfort. We want more pleasure. We don't want to end it. Therefore, we are afraid of death, aren't we? And we are developing more and more medical things. Isn't it because all this development is driven by this fear, deeper fear of death? Can we die when we're still alive? Not until the last moment of life. That is, die to this moment. So the consciousness is always emptied, always renewed. And such a living is dying. And dying is living. It is always fresh, innocent. A life that is dying at each moment has no fear at all. Because the fear also dies with it. But look at most people's life. They keep accumulating into this storehouse of the past. They don't end it. The more they accumulate, the more fear, isn't it? I mean, accumulate psychologically. The thoughts, experience, the achievement, the hurt, the trauma. So living is actually a matter of sheer action. To die now, empty. Let go. Finish it. And you can't imagine it. You must experience it. Because, the neurons are marvelous. They can renew by themselves. But this renewal comes from a mind that is able to end empty the me. When the me is always there, from youth until one becomes very old, this consciousness is never emptied. Therefore, there's no chance for the whole neuron system to renew. It is not something mysterious or spiritual, no that stuff. It's very practical stuff. It's can I and me now. So I can live afresh. I can look, observe, learn at each moment. I'm dying at each moment. I'm alive at each moment. Therefore, I don't fear anything. Because dying at this moment and my last breath has no difference, isn't it? Only last moment, the body died. That's it. But I die now at each moment. That's it. That's our life. Down to earth, isn't it? A life that is never trapped by thoughts, by illusions. It is dying. It is emptying. Therefore, it is alive at each moment. To do that, you don't need any philosophies. You don't need any ideas. You don't need any religions. You don't need any verse. Shady act. And only a life that is able to empty, end itself, can come upon what is love. Love is an eternal topic. But what is love? Is love an idea? Is love something romantic? Is love something sexual? Is love desire? Is love kind of experience? Most of us keep seeking love, hope to find love. But the more we seek, the more we are confused. We keep talking love in all kinds of ways, in different books, topics, ideas, philosophies. But what is a love? A loving state of mind? What kind of quality of mind is capable of loving? Most of us, living in the society by conforming to the pattern, imitating the society, the pattern. We are merely interested in ourselves. we become so self-concerned, utterly self-centered. Can we find love in that state or not? Or this selfishness, this self-concern denies love totally. Though we keep talking about love all the time. Then love is only an idea, isn't it? Which is being manipulated and exploited by the commercial world. Using nice pictures to trigger people feel, oh yeah, I'm being loved. And in this Western world, people associate sex with love in so many big ways. And the mind has accumulated so many sexual experiences. Is that love or not? Why this world gives such importance to sex? Is that because this world is devoid of love? But therefore, the mind is craving all kinds of experiences, including these sexual experiences. Perhaps sex is the only thing that the ego can't beat. The sexual experience perhaps can give one a momentary of life without the ego. That's why sex becomes so important as a relief from this life, which is so isolated, so suppressed, so suffocated, because the me never dies. So obviously, none of those is love. And how to compound this love? This state. When the mind is selfish, of course, it will know what is love, because it only loves itself. That's not love. For one's own pleasure, for one's own vanity. All those denies love. When the mind is hurt, it can also count love. Right? There's hatred. There's aggression. There's all kinds of antagonism, which is obvious, not love. A verbal mind, which is full of all kinds of opinions, views, always argue, doesn't know what is love. To love is to die, to empty all the hurt, all the ego things, all the verbal things. So the mind stays unknown. In that state, the mind has vast space. Love has no opposite. Where there's an opposite, love is not. Love is beyond any divisions. Where there's division, there's conflict. Love is not. So can the mind compound that vast space where there's no opposition, where there's no division, where there's no me, which is the center at all? And in that vast space, oh, that vast space is love. And love is energy, isn't it? When the mind lets go of all the past, all the me things, all the ego things, all the verbal things, the energy is no longer visited. And therefore, the energy is gathered. And this gathered energy has no conflict because it's beyond any divisions. And that energy is love, isn't it? And when the energy is gathered, the mind is silent, isn't it? And life is very vital, vital, because the energy is always there. It's always gushing. And that state is love, isn't it? The mind is very fresh, looking, learning, observing. And in that state, there's no conflict. There are no issues. There's only love. And love is never selfish. And a life in love is full of energy. It has no opposite, no hatred, no resistance. And such a living is full of passion. Passion is not a desire, it's not craving. We have reduced that word to something ugly in the general consciousness. And only a mind which is really in love, when the energy is purely gathered, in that state of living, there's a passion, therefore compassion. And in compassion, life has no issues at all. All of actions come from compassion. Therefore, there's no regret. There's no remorse. And life is 100% certain. Not from verse. Not rely on some verse to be certain. That's childish. But a life in love, in compassion, it's 100% certain. It's unshakable, immovable. Come back to this compassion or the love. We need to look at this society or any society. Society demands conformity, duty, and obligation, which are all mechanical things. But love, compassion, is never mechanical. Therefore, duty, obligation, denies compassion totally. Compassion is goodness, isn't it? Goodness, being good, not God, good. Goodness, being good without choice. That's called goodness, isn't it? I can say, I choose to be good. That's not good. I choose to good. That's not good at all. Being good is choiceless. And duty, obligation, denies goodness totally. So, to end our issues, not to seek methods, but to live in goodness. Duty, obligation, denies love, denies goodness, denies compassion. And what will you do? When you see that, actually, you have no choice. Living in goodness has no choice. So can I live life without conformity? Which means that I observe, learn, but I never blindly follow or obey. It has no meaning. Only make my life more and more careless, brutal, and I suffer. Everybody suffers. What's the point? So this reward is not through some activism or strike. Or there are so many strikes, right, in this society. But psychologically, negate it. Psychologically, never conform. When I see the danger of all the mechanical things running through in every corner of living, from people's thinking pattern, behavior pattern, to all the legal system, with numerous very subtle and organized patterns, and also the demand from the world to let me conform or follow? Can I stand alone? Because I see it's danger. When the mind sees danger, the mind must act. There's no choice, right? Just like when one is in the forest, seeing a very hungry tiger, you don't have a choice. You don't say, hey, tiger, let's sit down and discuss. There's no choice at all. You must act, shady act. Come back to the early talk today. It's a matter of shady act. In face of danger, nothing to discuss, nothing to haggle. Act, stay away, empty, live on. Then life becomes simple. Because the mind has come upon what is the greatest challenge ever. That is to stand alone, never be influenced, observe, learn, shady act. And this demand from this challenge overrides any demand from other so-called challenges. Because the mind is able to respond to the inner challenge all the time. So the mind is always alert, always urgent. Because the mind is so easily crafted, so easily influenced. So that's why living in simplicity, in authenticity, is very urgent. When you really come upon that urgency, you don't need to drink coffee. Right? Like that's danger. You must be fully alert for that all the time. Society is disorder. Society is danger. It's always there. You don't need to drink coffee to keep awake. And only a mind which is not awake rely on drugs to be awake, right? Caffeine, all kinds of other things. The intellectual drugs, all kinds of ideas, theories, fantasies, or the physical drugs. In this society, it is so popular. A mind that's awake depends on nothing. It is observing. The danger is always imminent. When you perceive that danger, you see, this beautiful life with love, compassion is always endangered. So the mind must always act. It is totally alive all the time. And only such a mind is silent. Very silent. A mind which is really alive is silent. It is so. When your life is fully alive, the mind is very silent. Why the mind is not silent? Because the mind is rationalizing all the nonsense. It never act, imitate. It want to tolerate it. But how can one tolerate danger? That's very silly. As long as one tolerates danger, one must use ideas to rationalize it, to put up with it. That's why the mind becomes more and more verbal. When the mind sees the danger, act. Finish it with all your issues, all the troubles. Otherwise, a verbal mind is becoming duller and duller with all the ideas, all the theories to rationalize it, rationalize the disorder. But the very way of rationalizing it is disorder. The order comes from the mind. See the danger in it. And that's the order. Not the order imposed by the society. But one lives with this inner order. Otherwise, the mind is only conforming to the external order, which is disorder. When the mind has the inner order, there's total integrity. Such a mind never follows, never conforms. And such a mind is always doing the right thing. And life can't be simpler, can't be more authentic than this. And when the mind is really in love, in compassion, there are no issues at all. And then you don't ask how to meditate. You don't care about meditation at all, because this is already the true meditation. Meditation is never divorced from the daily living. The true meditation is to learn, understand, and die, which is a unitary process. When you are really learning, observing, you are dying. It's one process. And living in this way requires tremendous observation and diligence. And when you are really living in this way, actually, not as an idea, such a living is true. It is truth. Truth is unknown, but it's there. And the only mind that stays unknown is capable of coming upon the truth all the time.